Nigerian evacuees have been waiting at Warsaw Chopin Airport bright and early ahead of the flights to Abuja. Their flight is expected to depart at 8 a.m. and arrive in Abuja at 3 p.m. this afternoon. For an update on the evacuation story so far, let's cross now to Arise International Correspondent Adefemi Akinsanya, who joins us now from the Chopin Airport. Femi, what's the latest, and have the evacuees been checked in, and are they all at the airport now?
Good morning to you all. Yes, they've all been checked in and they've all crossed into security and are likely at the gate already. However, it isn't smooth sailing completely. The issue is there are 180 seats available on the Air Peace flight from Warsaw into Abuja. And yesterday, it was 163 people who turned up and got their boarding passes, went into security before that flight was cancelled, which meant that there were 17 more seats available today for more Nigerians to show up. And they did. However, it was more than the 17 spaces that were able to be given to these people. So we had a situation where more than 30 people had turned up. Of those 30, some were taken, mostly women and travelers with young children were able to take advantage of those remaining seats, which left around 12 to 13 Nigerians completely left behind in terms of them not being able to make it on that flight. In fact, it was all young men ranging between ages of 19 to around 30, and one young woman who had to cross back over out of the airport and onto the coach and go back to the embassy funded hotel. And I've spoken to the ambassador, and he says that they will be responsible for the accommodation of those Nigerians left behind, and hoping that they'll be able to see a situation where more people will come and they can make arrangements for another charter flight. But another thing that is worth noting is the fact that of the 163 people who arrived yesterday and weren't able to fly, you'd expect that all of those 163 people would turn up. But actually, 7 of them didn't. They stayed at the hotel. And that is underscoring a situation of Nigerians who are still hesitant to return back home. And you'd have to ask yourself, why? Why are you choosing to stay in a country that you don't have complete legal or immigration clearance to stay in, rather than returning to your home country? And many of the people I've spoken to say it's two things. One, there's nothing for them to return to Nigeria. Two, in terms of economics or family. And sadly, also, many people who are reluctant to return are reluctant because they still have loved ones trapped in Sumy, trapped in Ukraine, trapped at the border, and they don't want to leave until they're able to leave together.
Oh, it's a really complex situation. What are you able to tell us about the evacuation from other European countries to Nigeria?
Well, I'm happy to hear that the evacuation flight from Bucharest in Romania seems to have already successfully landed in Abuja, and we're hoping that an Arise correspondent will be able to meet some of the returnees and talk to them about their experiences there and give a clearer depiction. Because for us in Poland, the consensus is that people have had to fight all the way to the plane. And when you overheard what a 19-year-old boy who was unable to fly today, he said he's tired of not being able to be seen as a victim because he is a male. He says that he has a sister, and the two of them are international students, and if they're short on money, parents would sooner give his sister funds and say, oh, you know, you're a boy, you're a man, you can look after yourself. And he said to hear that at the airport, that, oh, there are 17 more seats available and only women can take advantage of that. He was just saying that he is tired of being turned away and not being seen as a victim because of his gender. So that was interesting to hear. But in terms of other flights, there's still an evacuation flight from Budapest in Hungary. It's expected that that should be landing in Abuja also in the coming hours, and soon, if not already, the flights from Warsaw, Poland back to Abuja will be ready to leave in the immediate moments and should be landing around 2:30 to 3 p.m. or thereabouts. So hopefully by the end of Friday, we will have the first batch of this historic humanitarian effort to bring Nigerians home. The rhetoric last week and in the time before that was that Nigerians were being left behind, felt like they were left all on their own. So to have private citizens and the private sector in the form of Air Peace want to help this humanitarian effort and have a collaboration between the private sector and the Nigerian government in terms of these embassies come together and get people out is a great thing. It obviously hasn't been the smoothest process. It's pretty unlikely that many people thought that even after getting their boarding passes, they would have been turned away at the gate yesterday, which is what happened because of the punctuality issue. But that doesn't seem to be an issue here today, seeing as the first batch of Nigerian evacuees had successfully made it to the boarding gate and should be arriving in Abuja this afternoon.
Okay, yes, good news to hear that they will be arriving today. But could you take us through all that confusion that occurred yesterday at the airport with about 600 Nigerians boarding the flight already and having to be asked to disembark, and the authorities in Poland canceling the flight? What happened? What went wrong? Who is to blame? Is it a case of the evacuees not reporting early, or was it something from the Nigerian end in terms of our preparations? And secondly, I'd like to ask you about some of these Nigerians who don't want to return. You touch on it, but what really are the reasons why anybody trapped in a war zone will say, no, I'm not going anywhere? Because out of about 2,000 persons who were to be evacuated from Poland, we were told that only about 600 showed up. Another 12 showed up this morning. So there are some of them who are saying, we are going nowhere. Is it that they don't want to come home, or they have other considerations? What could be the reasons?
Thank you. So let me take the first bit of your question. Yesterday, it was a timing issue. When the flight that brought us from Lagos to Warsaw arrived in Poland, it arrived at just after 9 a.m. And the plan was that the Nigerian evacuees should have already been at the airport, already checked in and ready to fly back to Nigeria by 10 a.m. But at that time, there was only 2 Nigerians at the airport, a set of twins. We have footage of them in our report yesterday. And so when we arrived, we traveled 9 kilometers to the hotel where the evacuees were being lodged. And then that's where we saw a bigger number. They were flooded into their coaches, brought to the airport in different journeys. And when they did get here, there was a very, very lengthy queue. So all in all, it got to a situation where rather than leaving at 10 a.m., even at 2 o'clock, not everybody had 2 p.m., not everyone had finished checking in. So it got to a point where aviation regulations had to come in. A cruise duty shift is around 11 hours. And they had reported for duty by 8 a.m. yesterday. So at 2 a.m., with people still in the queues for boarding passes, there's no way they would have been able to get everybody on board and service this long-haul flight within that 11-hour period. So according to aviation regulations, it would be illegal to service that flight, which is why the charter airline told Air Peace, it's no longer legal for us to service this flight. We're going to have to cancel it. That information came to Air Peace at around 1:30 p.m. in an email that we have seen, and I also included in the report. But that information didn't immediately trickle down to the people at the airport and at the gate, because still at 2:30, people were still crossing into security. Their boarding passes were still valid, and it was only after they had all crossed in that we were hearing the first reports of there's no flight that's going to Nigeria anymore. That charter evacuation flight has not been able to even be boarded. So it wasn't even that they had to disembark. They never made it on board because of the lateness issue. Air Peace said that was the fault of the Nigerian embassy in Poland, that they didn't do enough to make sure that the evacuees were at the airport in the morning like they should have been. But the Nigerian ambassador to Poland says he has really struggled trying to get Nigerians out of their hotel rooms, onto the coaches and into the airport. And that is actually reflective of a lot of the things that we're seeing. The fact that there are at least 600 Nigerians who are known to the Nigerian embassy in Poland, but only 300, for example, have made themselves available for flights. And even then, those who were able to get a boarding pass yesterday, 7 of them didn't turn up today. So there's a disconnect. So moving to your second question, there is a real reason. There has to be a reason why people are choosing to stay in a country like Poland, where they do not have immigration approval to stay here long term, there has to be a reason why they're choosing to put themselves through that risk and not return. Some say it's economics. If they return to Nigeria, they would be starting from scratch and they don't know what to do. And so they'd rather stay in Europe. Europe, even if it's Eastern Europe, even if they have to face persecution and racism, to some of these Nigerian evacuees, it seems like a better option than to return home, which is very sad and disappointing. But also, there is a little bit of a different reason. Speaking to one of the young students yesterday night, he told me that for as far as he knows, in terms of people who have refused to return, that's because they still have loved ones, whether it's close friends, families, siblings, trapped in Sumy, still trapped in Ukraine, and have not been able to make it to any Eastern European country. So until they're able to ratify and meet up with their loved ones, they are not going to leave. But when we look at what has been happening, it does seem as though to some travelers, they'll find any excuse not to return to Nigeria, and that is quite telling.
Right. What can you tell us about the evacuation plans from other Eastern European countries, Femi?
Sure. So for now, as far as we've heard, it was 3 countries: Poland, Budapest in Hungary, and Bucharest in Romania. 3 of those countries had, of course, because they're neighboring to Ukraine, had a bigger number of Nigerian evacuees in them, which is why they are the 3 countries these first batch of evacuation flights tried to service. And so we're hoping that in the coming days we'll be able to establish a bit more information in terms of the state of Nigerians still in those Eastern European countries, and whether or not it's a similar situation where they wanted to leave but there weren't enough spaces for them, like was the case in here in Poland, because there are only 180 seats available on board, or whether or not it's a systemic issue, an economic issue, or one where people simply would rather wait out the conflict in Russia and Ukraine and hope that that will all come to an end soon so that they can return to their early lives. And it's, you know, it's a difficult one, because if you have students who have dedicated 6 years to the study of medicine who are now having to evacuate 3 months before being able to graduate, and they're able to return home, you'd have to ask yourself, why in the face of war are you choosing not to return to your country?
Well, Adefemi Akinsanya, thank you very much. But, you know, we thank you for the great work you are doing, but please keep safe. Adefemi Akinsanya.
I knew that
Very
was
proud
coming.
of you.
We all are, Adefemi.
Thank you very much. I will look forward to seeing you back home. Thank you very much.